Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We've got a great topic today, from personas to personalization, unifying product and marketing teams. And we've got a really awesome partner with us today, Mixpanel. And with that, I'll just dive right into the introductions. Neha, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm Neha, I'm a product manager at Mixpanel. I've been at Mixpanel for about 3 years at this point, and I lead our analysis area, which is how can we help users answer more questions, whether it's product questions, campaign related questions, or revenue questions.
That's great. And yeah, I'm Julia. I'm a product marketing manager here at OneSignal. I've been here about 2.5 years now. Have worked both on kind of the product side and the marketing side of the orgs in past roles, and think a lot about this now. At OneSignal, we work with both product managers and marketing managers to deliver better omnichannel messaging. So with that, I think we're just going to dive right in. Well, first, I'll give you a little intro about OneSignal. For those of you who maybe found us through Mixpanel, maybe a little bit newer, we help our customers maximize engagement and minimize churn with personalized messaging across push, in-app, email, live activities, and SMS. Really kind of at the core of our philosophy is simplicity, speed, and reliability for all. We know messaging touches many folks, many departments, so whether you're a developer, a product manager, or a marketer, we want to make sure you're able to achieve your goals easily and can rely on our platform to do its job. So, and with that, I'll hand it to Neha just to give a little overview of Mixpanel.
Yeah, I can walk you through a quick overview of Mixpanel for those who've not used it or who've just heard about it. So Mixpanel is primarily a self-serve analytics tool for digital experiences. Our whole thesis is if product teams, marketing teams can answer questions or get insights to what's happening, they can make much better decisions and faster decisions. So we enable you to build like user journey funnels, slice and dice your metrics by country, age, and other aspects, and also like build cohorts with which you can target the users you care about.
That's great, yeah. And Mixpanel and OneSignal work really well together. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end, but let's get to the heart of it. So why does product and marketing alignment matter? Hopefully, if you've joined, you already kind of believe that it matters, but just to kind of set the stage, I love how you kind of talk about this. So I'll hand it over to you to just kind of get us started.
Sure. So before we talk about how teams should be structured in our companies, whether it's more important to understand like why are we even thinking about this? How has the user journey potentially changed, which is impacting how teams should restructure their teams? So in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, I think there have been a lot of trends in the market. All of us are potentially aware of PLG, the whole terminology of product-led growth. And with that, the main shift that's happened was now we look at activation before acquisition, versus earlier we acquired and then activated. To talk a little bit more about it, think about like 4 or 5 years back, you would have some team that's either looking at a billboard or going checking out a website, and then you have to first like purchase a product or purchase an offering before you actually get to go into the product and try out the product. So you've not had any experience of what the product might be. You just know what it might offer. And so we would say, well, you can have 2 separate teams. The marketing team that's basically looking at bringing in the user, acquiring in the user, and getting them to buy the product or buy the plan or make a purchase. And then you have your product team that once they've signed up, once they've actually got a plan, then you're looking at activating them post that. But they don't have any buy-in into having to like get the user to purchase the product. It's all they've already purchased it. So that's how it used to be like 4 or 5 years back. Turn over to now, most people try before they buy. So you're actually looking at giving value much before they're making a purchase decision. So you're looking at showing them value, activating them before they've actually come and thought about, okay, let's now go buy this, let's go make this purchase. So that's a huge change that's happened, and I call it now activation before acquisition. The second one that's changed in terms of a user's experience is there is a lot more optionality now. Like earlier, I think used to have one offering. For example, I think there was a time when we had only like Netflix and maybe just Prime Video, 2 options in a media channel, please. Now we have like 10 to 12 options out there. And what this means is you have a limited time to create a first impression or show the value that you can offer. And so the user experience that you actually provide right through the first initial days, whether it's through acquisition and activation, through the early engagement, that really matters. Because if you lose this user soon enough, they potentially not going to come back and try because there's a lot more options out there. And I think these two trends have changed how a user experiences things, and in turn, it has changed what they expect from companies and digital products as well. So I think that is one of the main reasons why we're talking today, and I think why a lot of us are shifting how we operate and offer experiences to our end users.
Yeah, I love that. I think those trends really kind of set up this conversation perfectly because, yeah, really kind of the game has changed and your user journey shouldn't just equal a traditional kind of org chart anymore. But unfortunately, we often see that where, marketing, product, they can sit in really siloed teams and aren't working together to drive business impact. And really what we do see is when teams do work together, they're able to drive scalable growth by having marketing and product really just row in the same direction. So these are two kind of loops I like to talk about. One is this compounding engagement loop, which starts being able to precisely target new and existing users across channels. And of course, if you're able to speak to the right user at the right time with the right message, you are able to naturally kind of increase that user engagement, which naturally rises kind of that long-term retention, customer LTV. Of course, that's in and of itself a worthwhile goal, but really there's this last piece that kind of connects these together of when you're able to retain users for longer, able to drive more success, you're able to collect and centralize more valuable data that you're then able to use to kick this off again, precisely target your users. And there's really this kind of positive feedback loop flywheel you're able to set off when you have strong data and you're working cross-functionally to make sure that you're delivering a really cohesive user journey personalized to their behavior. Unfortunately, sometimes we see this kind of broken engagement loop where different teams are speaking to users in silos and you're delivering kind of an inconsistent and sometimes even confusing at worst experience. And naturally that drives disengagement, unsubscribes. And when you lose this ability to communicate with your users and understand their behavior, naturally you're going to deliver a less positive experience, driving churn, and you lose out on this ability to collect and centralize valuable data, which then just reinforces speaking to users in silos with imperfect data. So really, we're going to focus on setting up this compounding engagement loop, making sure you're sharing insights, working from the same page so both teams can drive better business impact. And so we're going to dig into how can you build bridges across teams? Why does that matter? And Neha, I think you have a great story that kind of illustrates this, so I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, I think you teed us up really well talking about the advantages once you have a more compounding loop that's happening over there. And I can talk through an example where we had, like, as we were talking through our customers and figuring out what's working and what's not, we had this really insightful example that they gave us. So we were working with a company where both the product and marketing team use Mixpanel. So I think we had the first point one where they were using a common tool. But these two teams worked separately. So as a company, their goal was, can we increase the new user revenue? And what they meant by that is the 30-day LTV that they were looking for, they wanted to increase that quarter over quarter. They had a target up there. Tactically, since these two teams were separate, they were given individual metrics. The marketing team was given a metric of number of signups, like you grow the number of signups. And the product team was given the goal of activation. It was a PLG company, so they were given the goal of activation and increasing activation rates. 6 months pass, the marketing team is celebrating. They've crushed their numbers, sign-up numbers. They've grown by about 20% in terms of number of signups. Product team, not so happy. Activation rates have actually dipped. And eventually, if you looked at the whole new user revenue that they were trying to grow, that had only gone up 3%. So you have the marketing team here talking about 20% increase in signups and celebrating it. And then eventually you're seeing only a 3% increase in revenue. And if you remember, the common goal for all of them was increase the new user revenue. And when they dug into it a little further to figure out like why this was happening, it came down to a few things. One, since the metrics were broken down across the two teams and they weren't really talking, each team was individually looking at what they wanted. What they actually really needed was a lot more communication over there. Like the marketing team was targeting users who were not what the product team considered as the core personas or the ICP for the product. So yes, we were getting a huge number of signups, but hardly any of them were retaining post like 3 days or post 7 days, which is also why it led to like much lower activation rates on the product end. So I think there were like two things that could have happened over here. One, if they were looking at a common metric, like a common metric was say potentially new activated users, then both the teams are looking to grow that. So if you have a huge number of signups and they're not converting, together you're figuring out, are we targeting the right users? Should we be changing whom we are targeting such that we get actually like quality users? We get users who are high intent to purchase, they're the ICP we require. Or there could have been a completely different way where the marketing team lets the product team knows there's actually a latent demand among this persona. Yes, we haven't built for it completely now, but potentially they could have changed the onboarding and growth product experience to cater more for these personas. So you could still be getting the same signups, but finally, at least the onboarding experience would have been more tailored for these personas. So you could at least check whether we're able to activate them. So there could have been a shift on either end if information was being shared, but just the breakdown between the two of them in terms of what metrics they owned led to an overall not achieving the company metric that they were looking to grow.
Yeah, I think that's such a great example of both kind of the risks of what can happen when your team is siloed, but also kind of the opportunities you mentioned, those kind of growth opportunities that you miss out on when you're not sharing insights and kind of working in lockstep. And a few themes kind of from that case study, I think first is just getting on the same page. So I think these kind of first 2 points, Neha, you kind of touched on a little bit in your case study.
Yeah, I think measuring the same metrics really matters. Like it starts from there. I think we all talk about it, data-driven actions. It starts from the right metric and co-owning that right metric, which is also why I think we've been having this new set of teams nowadays called the growth teams, which translate across both product and marketing users together coming into these growth teams. The whole idea is they own a common metric and then they figure out how to make that grow. And you own the user journey, like it's an end-to-end user experience. You can't have disjointed parts of it that you're looking to impact individually. It's overall like, what does the user need eventually to activate, and how do I work backwards from there?
Yeah, definitely. Just like really working at a strategic level, like really user-centered, user-first. And I think some things I've seen be helpful, and once you kind of get this high-level strategic alignment, just kind of day-to-day alignment, having kind of shared resources around personas, user journey maps, value pillars, messaging, making sure that, once you come together, you have your high-level project plans, you're kind of sustaining the way you speak to users, who you're speaking to. And of course, this can change and iterate, but making sure that you're kind of working from the same page. And next is continuously sharing insights. I think both teams are really fueled by powerful insights and do a lot of work, but sometimes they don't kind of share them across teams. I'm curious, Neha, have you seen that, and what does a good kind of example look like?
I honestly think that this is the biggest area of opportunity and like the biggest area to propel any good growth strategy, and maybe the biggest miss that most teams have today. There is a fine balance in what the marketing team brings in from insights in terms of they are the ones looking at, for those people who we don't even have as users today, what are their requirements, what are the latent demands out there, which are the kind of people that are like actually looking for your tool over there. So they have those insights, which actually helps you eventually grow, right? Because those are the users you potentially want to acquire. And then you have the product team, which is getting insights from like existing customers on why they love your team, or why they love your tool right now, what more can you achieve over there. So you're figuring out the value proposition here. And I think product teams potentially have a much better idea of what's the value proposition of the product overall. And if you can balance that on what's the value proposition we have today, what's the latent need or demand that exists outside, and how can we actually find a balance between those two such that you change the value proposition slightly to cater to this latent demand that exists. It's a win-win on both sides. And if these two teams actually share insights a lot more frequently, I think there's a lot of growth that can be achieved out there, because the two types of insights actually give you the best in breed that you have between the two layers.
Totally. I think, yeah, I totally agree. And I think, very often, like for instance, like exactly you said, like maybe marketing's doing a competitive analysis that's looking more at brand. How are they talking about it? Whereas product is maybe doing a little bit of like a deeper dive around certain kind of feature set or solution area. And these insights can actually be helpful across teams to make sure, like you said, that you're uniting how you're speaking about the product relative to others, and then actually what you're delivering in the product experience as well. So yeah, making sure you're sharing competitive intel, market research, feedback, making sure that you've worked hard to get on the same page, but it's not a static thing. It's something that's dynamic and needs to constantly be iterating and sustained.
I think there's also another angle there. Like marketing team always, like I think that, and I wouldn't say it's like always true, but I've seen this happen a lot in a lot of the customers we speak with. Marketing teams generally, if something is not working, blame it that the product is not a great fit. And the product team blames it the other way around, saying, well, we've not created the right awareness, right messaging out there. And I think there's actually a nice space in the middle. A lot of times when the marketing team is saying, well, it's not seeming like a fit, you don't have to go redo the whole product. At times it's like small tweaks here and there, which maybe speak in the terminology of the personas you're trying to get in, or it's small changes like a good example is, I think when we look at, we have both product users and marketing users in this panel. Product users love to have like to ad hoc analysis, go slice and dice, go really deep. Marketing teams have generally a set of metrics that they're looking at, growth teams and marketing teams, and they want those predefined and pre-built. Now, it's not an either or, because eventually to build those predefined metrics, you do need the ability to go deep. And so there are like good balances you can have, which does not mean completely redoing the product. And on the other end, like I think if you tell a product team this is your problem, like this is not working for this industry, at times they go all around and they're like, oh, we need to completely redo the product. But changing messaging is at times, or like some places of messaging, I won't say the overall vision or communicating that's a big lift, but at times tweaking certain messaging is a much more lower lift way to experiment and see if something is working versus going and rebuilding the whole product. And more teams should actually leverage that, like work with your marketing team, figure out how you can tweak messaging in a certain places, how you can make in-product messaging much better, or even on the website, like improve some of your messaging and experiment with that. It's a much lower lift for you to figure out whether this is working or is it not before you decide to go make a huge change.
Totally. I think that's such a great point. I mean, obviously, ultimately, every team wants the business to succeed and, for them to be successful. And, if you get too kind of siloed, focused in on your own team, you kind of miss the bigger picture and some of these kind of lower lift ways that can actually be kind of a win-win for both teams, which is actually a perfect segue into drive win-win strategic projects. Work together to achieve shared goals and drive better business impact. I mean, this is good probably practice for any kind of cross-functional partnership you're trying to build, especially with product and marketing. Find ways to be successful together. What we see at OneSignal very often, we work with many mobile apps who have this kind of high install rate and then experience a lot of new user churn. And really they want to increase this new user retention. Again, this is like fuel for growth, retaining your users, learning from them, iterating. And what we've seen increase that new user retention is being able to work cross-functionally to send targeted message sequences based on user data. So you need to work, if you're a marketing person, work with your product team to understand that user journey. What product data do we have available? And then vice versa, if product you have a goal around new activation or something like that, work with your marketing team to understand what messaging are they delivering today? How can we make it more personalized to the user journey? So finding projects like onboarding, upselling, cross-selling, sometimes even simple, seemingly simple things like your data, understanding what do you have access to, what needs to be cleaned up, making sure you're using similar, events, attributes, things like that. It can be even simple like that to find win-win projects. And so we've kind of covered market trends, why it's important to make sure you're thinking about product and marketing alignment, as well as some kind of themes and what we've seen be successful. But as we kind of move to our wrap-up stage, want to leave you with some actionable tips that you can take away today. So Neha, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Yeah. So the first one, and I think we've spoken about this through the examples, but one, it is really essential teams look at common metrics When I say teams, I mean like if you have a common user experience that you're looking at impacting, all the stakeholders that are actually impacting that should look at a common metric. We also see use a common platform so that you're spending more time actually driving actions versus questioning which platform is correct versus not. And I think a lot of teams fall into the trap. Spend less time debating whether the number is right or wrong. Spend more time actually trying to improve the number and actioning on it. I also mentioned this, but like look at the end user journey, like look at all the steps that impact the user experiences versus breaking that up into multiple things. So that's the first one, which I will really stress on, a full user journey analysis. The second one, which Julia was also talking about in some ways, like use a tool that helps you figure out the right user cohorts and actually go deep. Like the best personalization you can offer is you're able to form the right user cohort, and you want to be able to build those right cohorts, however deep it is. Maybe it is a person, like I want to figure out users who've done nothing in the last 7 days, but before that have made 5 purchases. And that's a nested, like 2-3 layered cohort, and you want to be able to build these so you can target them at the right moment at the right time. The third one is you do want to work, like have tight integrations with your engagement tools. At the end, the whole idea is personalization is all about also the right time. It's the right users, but at the right time in the right context. So look at having the right integrations with the engagement tools such that you're able to trigger your personalized messages, your personalized experiences at the exact right time when it's likely to see the most amount of like uptake and activation.
Yeah, definitely. Just being on the same page. I love what you said. Spend less time figuring out if the number's right and more time actually taking action on it. I think probably many people on this webinar can relate to that experience. I think that's really, really helpful, as well as digging deep and making sure you're taking action on the insights that you're coming up with.
I will say the right number matters, but there is a certain amount of like how far
but when you're not using like 5 different tools to measure one number and you actually have a centralized source of truth, it makes all the difference.
Well, you are in a Mixpanel and OneSignal webinar, so we also have to tell you how we're trying to help you build towards that, provide your user with a combined experience and personalize that experience. So over the last like couple of years, Mixpanel has evolved to support most of these growth team requirements and marketing team requirements and the whole full user journey experience. So we've launched a bunch of things around Mixpanel marketing analytics. We've made it much easier. Like I think the common thing was we have tools. Marketers used to exist in GA, and then product managers used to be in Mixpanel and a few other tools. And the whole idea is if we can offer that in one space. So we've also made it easier beyond just offering it to move from GA4 to Mixpanel. There's a lot of documentation out there. We've improved and we've added a lot more integrations to engagement tools. Like OneSignal is one of our popular engagement integrations out there, so that you can build the right cohorts and then target them for engagement. So yeah, we've evolved to reflect the user journey's experience and provide our customers that ability to analyze the whole full user journey as well.
Yeah, and what we've seen is when you're able to have that kind of full user journey and use all of that data to create insights, it's a win-win for us in terms of OneSignal. You're able to take better action, more effective action on these insights. So using, integrations with top tools like Mixpanel, you're able to create these really targeted cohorts, send them over to OneSignal, and then deliver a sequence of messages in real time based on user behavior. And when you're able to send relevant messages based on their behavior, they're more effective. I think that's probably intuitive, but it's worth saying when you send personalized messaging, it's more effective. And ultimately, again, it's really crucial to make sure you're kind of connecting that loop, tracking your results, identifying opportunities for improvement, passing that engagement data back to Mixpanel to inform further insights, and again, kind of get this compounding loop going, whether you're focused on onboarding, re-engagement, increasing trials, post-purchase experience. These two tools can really kind of work in concert together. And so we've made it through kind of the chunk of the content today, but we wanted to make sure we left a few minutes for questions. So I'm gonna look here. Oh yeah, this first one, Neha, I think you probably have some great insight into this, but can you share some examples of KPIs that work well to measure the success of both teams' efforts together?
Sure. Maybe I could talk more. So there are like multiple places where these two teams work together. There's obviously the new user onboarding and new user growth, which is the first space where you're looking at acquiring new users. And then you also obviously have re-engagement and a bunch of those. But let's talk about new user growth. How, when you're acquiring users, what are common metrics you want to look at? I think a good KPI I've generally seen is one, if you look at number of activated users, growth month over month, like that's a good one to look at, or look at 30-day LTV. Now, these are good metrics because they don't, like if you're looking at number of activated users growth month over month, you've already baked in for the fact like the user will be activated, they'll be high enough quality, and then you're looking at it. If I had instead say a sign up or activation rate, they're both impacted. Like sign up is impacted by the quality, like who you're targeting. Percentage of activation depends a lot on what the base is, like what your sign up numbers are. If the sign up numbers are too huge but not too useful, your activation rates are going to go low. So those two are very biased. But if you look at number of activated users as such and how is that growing month over month, that's a good number to look at. It takes care of all these biases that exist. If you look at a 30-day LTV, that's again a good one to look at because you're looking at if a user is retaining for 30 days. And so you've seen them engage and retain. So I'd say those are two good numbers I've generally looked at. There's obviously also revenue, but that's more lagging indicator, I would say. It takes a while to get there. So 30-day LTV is a good one.
Yeah, no, I love that, how it's an opportunity to both kind of measure, like, are you acquiring the right folks, are you acquiring quality users, but also are you delivering the right product experience? I think that's really a great kind of shared metric to look at. Here's another question. What are some of the common challenges that one could expect to encounter in aligning product and marketing teams? I mean, just speaking from my own experience, just having worked both on the product and marketing sides of the org, I think it's not, the challenges wouldn't be anything necessarily unique to these teams. It's more just working cross-functionally. People, being used to measuring different things, not having a shared language or not really having a same page that you're working from. So some of that kind of early alignment work could require some change management and be kind of challenging to break the status quo. But ultimately, I think when you work with people who want to be successful and want to drive success for the company, if you really focus on those early win-win opportunities, that can really kind of help avoid any kind of downstream challenges. But I'm curious, Neha, does anything come to mind for you for any common challenges folks might experience?
I agree with everything you said. I think I've seen something similar. Like there's obviously the initial anytime there's a new team that's formed or two teams start working with each other, how do you align on what are the metrics you want to move? What's the common terminology? The same metric could be called differently in different places. So that is obviously the biggest problem I've seen. I think the one thing that I have realized though is if you start talking in terms of KPIs, there's a lot more alignment you start seeing. But a common trap most people fall into is they all talk about initiatives that they are running. At that point, then you're each trying to push the initiative that you're running and talk about why that's important versus like, let's look at what metric we want to move and work backwards from there. But it's mainly just like aligning on metrics, aligning on the terminology and starting from there and thinking about what's the prioritization in terms of which metric we want to move and how much.
Yeah, I love that. I think always coming back to data can help avoid some of that. People have the things they're already working on that's already in progress and they want to move that forward. And it's like, no, let's just focus on a shared goal that's clear I think that can really help. I'm just gonna see if there are any other questions in the last minute. I don't see any. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Neha. Thank you so much for coming to chat with us about all your great insights into how to bring product and marketing teams together. If you have any other questions that come to mind, feel free to reach out. We are happy to chat about this topic, probably ad nauseum. But yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you, Julia, for having me, and thank you all for joining us.